In this video, we will be looking at a second model for the relationship between price ratio and market share. Now, we know that at 0.5 the market share is supposed to be 0%, at 1 market share is supposed to be 11%, at 1.5 41%. What if we have a price ratio that is not one of these values? Let's say my price ratio is 1.4, what do I do then? In this model, what we're going to assume is in each interval, 1 to 1.5, 1.5 to 2, 2 to 2.5, etc., there is a linear jump from the beginning of the interval to the end of the interval. So what we mean is from 1 to 1.5, the market share increases linearly from 11% to 41%. Now let's illustrate how we can use this to figure out the market share when, let's say, your price ratio is 1.4. Now, given our numbers, we know that if the price ratio is 1, the market share is 11%. If the price ratio is 1.5, the market share is 41%. What happens if the price ratio is 1.4? Now, we're going to assume that there is a linear change from 11% to 41% in this interval from 1 to 1.5, which means in 0.5 steps, when the price ratio changes by 0.5, the market share changes by 30%. So in a step of 0.5, I see an increase of 30%, which tells me that the slope of this line in this particular interval is 60%. Now we'll keep that information in mind, and now I want to figure out what happens at 1.4. If the price ratio is 1.4, that means I'm taking a step of 0.4 from 1.0. Well, if my slope is 60%, then in a step size of 0.4, my rise is going to be 24%. So if I'm starting at 11% here, then I will add 24% to it, and my final market share at 1.4 is going to be 35%. Now I'm going to use that concept of linear interpolation here. I have 6 intervals here, and I'm going to find the slope in each interval by looking at the end percentage, beginning percentage, divided by the end price ratio and the beginning price ratio. This tells me that in the first interval my slope is 0.22, and if I copy paste this, I will get that my slope goes from 22% to 60% to 70%, etc. Now, given a price ratio, let's say 1.4, here's what I will do. The first thing I need to figure out is in which interval this 1.4 is. In order to do that, I need to figure out where this value lies in this price ratio list. So for that, I'll use a lookup function. Pick this up. I'll say look it up here, and then tell me what's going on, and tell me what's going on, which interval I end up in. And I'm going to copy paste this formula all the way down from row 10 to row 19. So I'm going to make all these absolute references. Now, as you can see, it tells me if you are in 1.4, you're in interval 2. Let's try what happens if I'm in 1.7, I'm in interval 3. If I'm at price ratio 2.6, I'm in interval 5. So this all works out. And one small thing to fix here is in interval 6, which is basically what happens after 3 and on, I really don't have a slope, so I should just give 0%. But I also should make sure that I never enter a number here that is more than 3.0. So once I find the interval, the next thing I need to figure out is what is the beginning percentage there, how much of a step size do I have given this value from the beginning of the interval and what current slope I should be using. So let's illustrate this for 1.4. In 1.4, I'm in interval 2, which means my beginning percentage is going to be 11%. My step size is going to be 0.4, which is how far I am from the beginning of the interval 1. And then the current slope is, since I'm in interval 2, is going to be 60%. So let's pick up those three numbers. So the beginning percentage is, I can pick up using the index function and tell Excel give me the second element here. And again, I'm going to make this absolute. And let's also format this so I have a percentage here. So beginning percentage is 11%. Step size. So the step size is how far 1.4 is away from the beginning of interval 2, which goes from 1 to 1.5. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say 1.4 minus, give me the beginning of that interval, which is index. I could have also used a lookup function. Second. And again, I want this absolute reference. So what this one is doing is telling me take 1.4 and then look at what interval you're in and pick up the beginning of the interval, which is 1, and then look at the difference, give me the step size, which is 0.4. And the current slope is, since I'm in interval 2, is going to be index, or let's use lookup this time. The current slope is lookup interval 2 in this array, and then report in this array. And I'm going to make these absolute references. So slope is, again, we can make a percentage 60%. So if I want to figure out the percentage of buyers, the percentage of market share at 1.4, now I can actually utilize the values from D, E, and F to figure out that. So here's what I do. I know that at the beginning of the interval, my percentage is going to be 11% plus how large a step I have taken within that interval times what the current slope is in that interval. So it's going to be 40 times 60% is going to give me 24% rise, and then I'm going to add that to 11% to get 35%, which was exactly what I had gotten during my presentation.